Justice is a blade of obsidian, sharp, dark, and final, leaving no room for those who choose to live in lies. Witness the intense cinematic drama of a reckoning that has been decades in the making for our characters. Subscribe today and watch as the scales of fate finally balance. The morning my mother told me I had 72 hours to clear out my belongings, I was standing in the kitchen I had renovated with my own hands, the white subway tiles I'd picked out on a Sunday afternoon at Home Depot, the pendant lights I'd hung myself after watching YouTube tutorials for 3 hours straight, the farmhouse sink I'd saved up for over 6 months. I remember staring at the grout lines and thinking, I chose that color. Alabaster. Not white. Alabaster. And now she was telling me none of it was mine anymore. Your brother is moving in, she said. Just like that. Like she was telling me the weather. He needs a stable place, and this house is going to him. You're young. You'll figure it out. My father sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, the one I'd found at an estate sale in Naperville and refinished over a long weekend, and said nothing. Just turned his coffee mug in slow circles like the conversation had nothing to do with him. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just nodded and said, okay, I'll start packing. But I wasn't starting to pack. I was starting to think. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the context, and trust me, the context is everything. My grandmother passed away 4 years ago. She was the kind of woman who made everything from scratch. Pie crusts, opinions, plans. She had lived in that house for 31 years, in a quiet neighborhood outside of Columbus, Ohio, where the streets still have sidewalks and the neighbors still wave. When she got sick, I was the one who moved in to help. I was 27. I had a decent apartment and a decent job as a paralegal downtown, and I gave both up. Well, I kept the job I just started commuting to take care of her. My brother was 32 at the time and lived 20 minutes away. He visited on holidays. He sent flowers when she was hospitalized. He was not there for the 3 a.m. breathing scares or the medication schedules or the 3 separate conversations where she made me promise not to sell her china. I'm not saying I'm a saint, I'm saying I was present. When my grandmother passed, there was a will. There is always a will in stories like this, because without the will, there is no story. Her attorney, who had known her for over a decade, called a family meeting 2 weeks after the funeral. My parents were there. My brother was there. His wife sat in the back and scrolled through her phone. I sat next to my mother and held her hand because I thought that was what you did. The will left the house to me. Not to my parents, not to my brother, to me, by name, with a note attached that her attorney read aloud in a voice that betrayed no emotion. She was here. She knows what this house means. I trust her with it. My brother stood up and left the room before the attorney finished reading. My mother cried, but not the kind of crying that means grief, the other kind. My father said we would figure it out as a family. I transferred the deed into my name, paid the associated fees, and got a real estate attorney to walk me through the process, all on my own, over the following 2 months. The house was mine, legally, clearly, without question. I kept living there. I kept mealing the property taxes. I kept the gutters clean and the furnace serviced and the lawn mowed. I repainted the exterior the summer after my grandmother died because she had always wanted to but never gotten around to it. Soft sage green. She would have loved it. What I did not fully understand at the time was that my parents had been using the house as a kind of informal emotional asset, something they believed would eventually circle back to them, to the family unit, to their son who kept making bad financial decisions and needed somewhere to land. They never said this directly, but families communicate in ways that have nothing to do with words. The first sign was small. My mother started referring to the house as the family home at Thanksgiving. I let it go. The second sign was medium. My father mentioned, casually, over a phone call, that my brother might need to crash somewhere for a few months. I said that wasn't going to work. My father said we'd talk about it. We didn't talk about it. The third sign was the conversation in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning in February. 72 hours. I want to pause here and tell you something I've learned from working as a paralegal for 7 years. The people most likely to threaten you with legal-sounding ultimatums are the people who have the least legal ground to stand on. My mother said, "Your brother is moving in," with the confidence of someone who believed it was true. But you cannot give away a house that isn't yours. You can want to. You can plan to. You can implant to. You can announce it at family dinners and tell your son to start packing his things. But the deed does not care about any of that. The deed has a name on it, and that name was mine. I went to work that day. I did not call in sick and spiral. I sat at my desk, pulled up the county auditor's website, and looked up my property record for the fourth time since I'd transferred the deed, just to feel the steadiness of it. Owner of record, my name. Assessed value, $187,400. It was there. It had always been there. At lunch, I texted my friend, the one I've known since college, the one who became a family law attorney in Cincinnati and who has been my unofficial legal sanity check for years. I told her what happened. She called me back in 4 minutes. "Change the locks," she said, before I even finished the sentence. "I haven't moved anything yet." "I know. Don't. You don't have to move anything. It's your house. Who told them they could give it to someone else?" My mom seems to genuinely believe she can. There was a pause. "Has anyone tried to put anything in writing? Retitle the property? Anything?" "Not that I know of." "Then right now it's just noise, but change the locks anyway and send me a copy of the deed." I sent her the deed. I ordered new locks from Amazon, the kind you can rekey yourself, and I picked up a copy of every financial record I had tied to that house, property tax receipts in my name, the invoice from the exterior painting company, the permit I'd pulled when I replaced the water heater, the receipts from every Home Depot run for the past 4 years. I had them because I am, professionally speaking, a person who keeps records. I put them all in a manila folder and I labeled it, neatly, in black marker with the address of the house. That night I slept in my own bed under the quilt my grandmother had made, and I did not pack a single thing. Before I keep going, I want to stop and ask you something. What time is it right now, and where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'm always curious who's out there at this hour. Wherever this hour is for you. By the time the 72 hours had technically elapsed, my brother had texted me twice and called once. The text said things like, "Mom says you're being difficult," and "Just be reasonable. We can work something out." The call I let go to voicemail. He said he was planning to come by Thursday to start getting a feel for the space. I saved that voicemail. Thursday morning, I woke up early. I made coffee in the kitchen with the farmhouse sink and the alabaster grout and the pendant lights, and I sat at the refinished estate sale table, and I waited. My brother rang the doorbell at 11. I opened the door. He had a measuring tape in his hand. I don't know why that detail has stayed with me. Maybe because it was so presumptuous, so physical. This little metal coil that meant he had already started planning where his furniture would go. "Hey," he said. Like this was normal. Like he was stopping by to borrow a tool. "Hey," I said, "you can't come in." He laughed, actually laughed. "Come on," Mom said. "Mom doesn't own this house," I said. "I do. I have the deed. My name is on the county record and I've spoken to an attorney. You're not moving in here." The laugh faded. "You're serious?" "I've been serious since Tuesday. I just didn't argue with her because arguing wasn't going to change the legal reality." He looked at me for a long moment. I could see him recalibrating, figuring out which angle to take. He went with wounded. "Grandma would have wanted us to take care of each other." "Grandma wrote a will," I said. "She told me exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to have this house." "You know why she did that, right? Because you were convenient. You were here. She didn't do it because you were—" I closed the door. I stood in my hallway with my back against the door, and I listened to him knock twice more and then stop. I heard his car start. I heard him leave. My hands weren't shaking. I noticed that specifically. I'd expected them to shake. What happened over the next 3 weeks was unpleasant in the specific, exhausting way that family conflict is always unpleasant. Not dramatic, just draining. My mother called me every other day. Some calls were tearful. Some were cold. One of them, I think she had my father on the line too, though he barely spoke. She said I was being selfish. She said the family had expected this house to stay in the family. I pointed out, as calmly as I could, that the house was staying in the family. Her granddaughter's name was on the deed. She did not find this funny. She told me I had caused irreparable damage. I told her I was open to a conversation at any time, as long as that conversation wasn't about me giving up my house. She stopped calling after that. My brother's situation, I found out through other relatives, was worse than I had understood. He had gone through a foreclosure 2 years earlier, something my parents had never mentioned to me, possibly because they were hoping to solve it quietly, possibly because they were hoping to solve it quietly, possibly because they were embarrassed. He and his wife had been renting since then, burning through their savings, and my parents had decided that my grandmother's house was the answer. Not a loan, not a rental arrangement, not a conversation with me about options. Just a transfer of my property to their son, announced as a fait accompli, because they assumed I would comply. This is the thing I keep coming back to. They assumed I would comply. I'm the younger one. I'm the daughter, not the son. I'm the one who usually keeps the peace. They had 30 years of data suggesting that when things got uncomfortable, I would find a way to make it less uncomfortable for everyone else. I want to be honest. Part of me understood the impulse. My brother was struggling. I wasn't. The house was big enough for more than one person, and if someone had come to me like a real person, sat down with me, explained the situation, asked if there was any way I could help, I might have responded differently. I might have offered a short-term rental arrangement at below market rate. I might have helped them brainstorm options. I don't know. But they didn't ask. They announced. And there is something about being told that a decision has already been made about something that belongs to you, without your input, without your consent, that closes a door in you. I can't explain it better than that. The door closed. About a month after the Thursday visit, I got a letter. It was from my parents' attorney, an actual formal letter on letterhead, which told me that my parents believed they had a legitimate interest in the property and were prepared to pursue all available legal remedies if I did not agree to a family mediation session within 30 days. I read it twice, then took a photo and sent it to my friend. She called me back in 3 minutes this time. "This is a scare letter," she said. "They don't have a case. The deed is in your name. The will is properly executed and probated. There's no legal basis for their claim. Should I be worried? You should respond through an attorney so they know you're taking it seriously. But no, substantively, they have nothing. The only thing they could potentially argue is undue influence on the will, that your grandmother was pressured into leaving you the house. But that's extremely hard to prove, and frankly, you weren't the one who had anything to gain from pressuring her. I hired a real estate attorney, my own, not my friend, because I wanted someone licensed in Ohio and fully focused on this. She sent a response letter within the week. It was precise and brief, and said, essentially, the property record is clear, the will was probated without contest, and my client is not interested in mediation regarding the ownership of her home. We never heard back. I want to tell you about the moment I knew it was over, not legally but emotionally. It was a Sunday, maybe 6 weeks after everything. I was in the backyard, which still had my grandmother's rose bushes along the back fence, the ones she had tended for 20 years, and that I had learned to prune badly and then slightly less badly over the past 4 years. I was out there with my gardening gloves and a cup of coffee getting cold on the porch railing, and I noticed the roses were budding. Early because it had been a warm spring. These small, tight fists of dark pink pushing out of the canes. And I thought, she planted these. She is gone. But they are still here, and I am still here, and this is still mine. I didn't cry. I just stood there for a while in the sun and felt the particular weight of something settling. Not happiness exactly, but solidity. The ground under me was mine. The house behind me was mine. The roses in front of me were budding whether anyone thought about them or not. I have not spoken to my mother since the month after the letter. We are not in contact. I don't know if that will change. My brother and I have exchanged a few texts about logistics, returning some items he'd left in my grandmother's storage space, that kind of thing, but we are not close, and I don't pretend we are. My father sent me a message on my birthday. It said, "Happy birthday, hope you're well." I replied, "Thank you. That is the full extent of it. I know there will be people who hear this and think I should have found a compromise, that I should have put the family first, that a house is just a house and it wasn't worth losing the relationships. But I want to say clearly, I didn't choose this. I didn't file any paperwork against them. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't do anything except refuse to give away something that was mine. Every escalation after that came from their side. The ultimatum, the letter, the attorney. I held my ground. That is the whole story. The rose bushes bloomed fully by May, deep pink, almost red at the center, the way my grandmother had always described them when she talked about them in the years before she got too sick to go outside. I took a picture and didn't send it to anyone. Some things you just keep for yourself. The property taxes are current, the gutters are clean, the furnace was serviced last October. The alabaster grout is still my favorite thing about the kitchen. I'm not going anywhere. I think about the measuring tape a lot, that small, stupid detail. My brother standing at my front door, holding it like the house was already his, like the only thing left was to figure out where the couch would go. He wasn't being malicious in that moment. He genuinely believed what my mother had told him. And that, more than anything else in this story, is what I keep turning over. The damage that gets done when people confuse wanting something to be true with it actually being true. My grandmother didn't leave me the house by accident. She made a decision, put it in writing, had it witnessed and filed and probated. She did it because she had watched for years and she knew, not guessed, knew, who would take care of what she had built. That's not luck. That's the result of showing up, quietly, consistently, when no one was watching and there was nothing obvious to gain. I didn't move in with her because I thought I'd inherit something. I moved in because she needed help and I was the one who could give it. Those are different things, and they lead to different outcomes. That's not a spiritual concept. It's just how cause and effect works over time. What I've learned, what I actually believe now, not because it sounds good, but because I've lived it, is that the qualities that protect you in moments like this are ones you have to build long before the crisis arrives. I had 7 years of records, because I am professionally someone who keeps records. I didn't panic when my mother delivered that ultimatum because I already knew what the legal reality was. I didn't argue at the door because I understood that no argument was going to change a deed. None of that was available to me in the moment. If I hadn't already become the kind of person who thinks clearly under pressure, who knows when to speak and when to go quiet and prepare. My brother had none of that. Not because he's a bad person, but because he had spent years assuming that things would work out, that someone would catch him, cover him, solve it. The foreclosure didn't come from nowhere. And when my mother handed him a solution that wasn't hers to give, he took it without asking whether it was real. That is its own kind of cost. I'm not angry at him anymore. What I feel is closer to something I don't have a clean word for. A kind of sad clarity. We grew up in the same house with the same parents, and we became very different people. I became someone who files paperwork and changes the locks and does not move her furniture out of a house she legally owns. He became someone who shows up with a measuring tape. The roses bloomed this spring again, even fuller than last year. I still don't send pictures to anyone. Some things you just carry for yourself, not as grief, not as triumph, just as proof that what you tended is still growing. I think that's enough.